Hey, it's Marthea Pitts, the MSW coach. And I want to talk about why it's so important to give yourself credit for the work that you do. As I'm talking, I'm going to send an email out letting people know I am on YouTube live talking right now. So if you're on a break, come join me. If you are catching this replay, drop down in the comments here on YouTube. Let me just test some out real quick. Yeah, drop down in the comments for me, hashtag replay. So I know that you came and you watched and you learned something. So give me just a moment to set up the room. So I literally just got out of office hour session with one of my micro to macro career accelerator coaching clients, um, as as a part of being in the program, which is a group career coaching program. One of the benefits of being in the program is that you get actual one-on-one time with me on a weekly basis for 15 minutes. And I call them office hour sessions. And what we do in office hour sessions is I assist my coaching clients with whatever they need to be, whatever they're currently working on, but in a one-on-one setting, right? And so let me hit record on this. Hold on a second. And so one of the things that I was just working with my coaching client about was we were reviewing her resume. She literally just a few weeks ago, I think 2 weeks at this point, if that, maybe one, just wrapped up her one-on-one resume writing intensive with me. And she is now working through writing her master macro resume. And she wanted me to like just take a look at what she's created so far. And so one of the things that I told her, I was like, "Oh, I should come live and talk about this because this is something I talk a lot about with my coaching clients is the importance of giving yourself credit." So I wrote down some quick notes real quick because this is an unplanned live. So if you're in the room, tell me, hey, let me know where you're logging in from. But one of the biggest issues I see, and ultimately, if you are guilty of this, it really may be the reason why you don't think you're perfect enough to get a macro social work job. And I say that only because I was recently talking to a new social worker, someone who's currently working on their MSW degree, and they're like in the final stages of their degree, and she is like constantly floating back and forth between what type of practice she wants to do, what she wants to do in the world of work once she completes her program later this year. But she's been following my work for years at this point. And she told me the other day, she was like, "I don't think I'm perfect enough for macro work." And I was like, "What? What does that mean?" Right? Even though she has like tons of pre-social work experience. So I wanted to come on and talk about that because I know that sentiment is true, not just with current social work students, but current social workers who are actually in the field with 2, 5, 10+ years of experience. They don't feel that they are air quotes perfect enough. And I want to say that the primary reason why you feel that you are not perfect enough, right, to get these types of jobs is because you most likely are not giving yourself credit for the current work that you do as a social worker. And so what I mean by that is a lot of the times what I see is that social workers really under what is the word? They I want to say like they minimize what they do. And a large part of that is because you do it so well that you don't think it's a big deal, right? What I mean by that is because it's so easy for you, because it's so natural for you to do things, because you most likely have been a high achiever all your life, or you just, have been exceptional at anything and everything without ever really trying. It's when it comes to your career and you're doing work in the world, and it because it's so easy to you, you don't attach like, oh, this is a big deal, right? Because you've done much harder things in your life. And so I wanted to talk about the dangers of not giving yourself credit. And I'm going to use a specific example with my coaching client that I literally just ended her office. We just literally ended the office hour session. And on her resume, she was capturing an experience of where because I teach my coaching clients how to identify non-case management experiences that they have that can qualify them for the macro jobs they want. And so one of those experiences that she in the bullet that she drafted, she said that she implemented the thing, right? However, I know from talking with her and during the Sunday coaching call that she did way more than implement it. So as I'm reading the bullet and I get to the end of it, I asked her, I said, did you really just implement it or did you create it? And she was like, well, really, right? These are like the common responses from my coaching clients because they love to minimize what they do, right? So she's like, well, yeah, I did. I said, yeah, you did. You created the thing. You not only created it, but you implemented the system and then you evaluate it on an ongoing basis, right? And so she was like, yeah, I did. And so I'm helping her draft the bullet to accurately capture what she did around creation of this new system. And I'm showing her how to tie like the value of what she did to it, how to identify and how to capture in words the value of what she did in for that one specific thing experience, what I call experience that she had. And so at the end of drafting the bullet, she's like, wow, that is a complete difference. And she was like, that's actually what I did. And so I wanted to come to talk to you about, are you guilty of minimizing what you did? And if so, I want to urge you to work on that, to address it sooner than later, because it hurts you in more ways than just drafting of your resume. The first way that it hurts you when you minimize what you do in your work on a daily basis and the value attached to it, and I'll talk more about value in a moment, is that it prevents you from being able to understand what experience you have that can get you the macro job that you want, right? So if you walk through the world of work, through your career, thinking that nothing that you do in any of your jobs, past or present, is a big deal, you will believe that you don't have valuable experience to get the job that you want, because in your mind's eye, you're like, I didn't do anything major. That's nothing. I didn't really do anything. All I did was see clients, right? You don't have enough information to pull from to accurately assess, do you really truly qualify for something more? Right. So the first way that it hurts you is because is that it leads you to a place to believe that you are not experienced. That was the whole reason that I had the How You're Qualified to Get Macro Social Work Jobs webinar that I just had literally 2 nights ago on Tuesday. That was an extreme hit for those who purchased their ticket and attended. They started out at the beginning of the webinar saying that they don't qualify, they're not sure if they have any experience, to at the end the aha moments and the light bulb moments were just off the charts around, wow, I'm qualified. I'm going to start job searching immediately. Wow, I'm interested in learning more about what else do I have experience in. I'm going to start applying right away. They went from very disillusioned and from a place at the start of the webinar from like a deficit standpoint. I don't have what I need more. No, I don't qualify. I feel, to in less than 45 minutes to an hour, being very certain and confident about the experience that they had, so much so that they were ready to take action immediately. So the first sticking like danger area when you don't give yourself credit for the work you do is that it leads you to over time believe that you don't have experience to do anything over and beyond case management. Okay. So because you don't see the tangibles, you have not captured what you did, you don't know how to assess it, you don't know how to evaluate it. So when you look at other jobs in comparison to what you believe you do as a case manager, you're like, that doesn't measure up. I can't do it. Right. And over time, what that will lead you most likely to do is over credential yourself. I always talk about over credentialing because it would be a misuse of my platform as a workforce development expert to not talk to you about over credentialing. It's a very real thing where you have all of these credentials, certifications, licensures, and things like that. However, you are in a role that does not either require it or is not compensating you accordingly for the credentials that you have massed. What that means is you're in a job that's designed for a social service worker, someone who at minimum just needs a high school diploma. However, you are the person with multiple master's degrees, multiple bachelor's degrees, multiple licensures, multiple credentials and other certifications. You are over credentialed. You're not in a job that matches the education, the credentials that you have behind your name. Okay. So the second danger of not giving yourself credit, even when it just comes to you. We're not getting super deep about like putting it on your resume and things like that. But the danger of just for yourself, not giving yourself credit for the work you do is that it diminishes your career confidence. Right. So inside of the micro to macro career accelerator, we call them scary jobs. Right. It's when Marthea, the vision I have for my coaching clients is that you're going to go for the $150,000 plus jobs, the jobs where you are not necessarily in a leadership role, but you are a big deal and you are really in a role where you have power and authority to enact and really move the needle closer to progress for your population. When I drop those job leads in my community for my past and present coaching clients, I have an ongoing community for them where I share job leads, I share resources, I go live in the group. I share professional development opportunities. People get weird, right? That's the word I have for it, right? So we call them scary jobs, or they come up with 50,000 reasons under the sun as to why they think they can't qualify for the job. And so I say to you as well that, and as a result of that, that's a result of career confidence. That's a clear indicator that you need to work on your career confidence. If you see jobs with large sounding job titles, jobs with larger salaries attached to them than you are historically accustomed to making, and when you see them, you're like, oh no, I can't do that without even reading the job description. You're just reading it from the little preview screen on the job board, and you see the job title and you see the sentence about the salary, and you're like, oh no, I cannot do that. I don't qualify for that. That is not for me. That's for someone else. Oh, it's going to be too hard. Oh, they want me to do too much. That is a sign that your career confidence has been impacted. And the most likely the origin place is that you're not giving yourself credit. Because when you don't give yourself credit, it's hard for you to see for yourself how what you really did as a case manager is just step one of what they want you to do in this new job, what you are considering to be a scary job. So like in the webinar that I had on Tuesday, how I started the webinar was showing the social workers in attendance who registered where the the experience the thing you do as a case manager is the prerequisite to having the ability of doing this thing that's in this job post that the macro employer is looking for in an ideal candidate, right? So I'm gonna put in relationships to courses because y'all are educated people. You love education, right? So you know how when you take ENC 1102, the second English class, as a part of your general requirements to get your bachelor's degree, but before you can take ENC 1102, you had to take ENC 1101, right? It's the same thing with your job as a case manager. Your case management job is like 1101. The macro job is 1102. When you went into ENC 1102 class, they didn't expect for you to come in to be a master at an ENC 1102. They wanted you to at least have the bare minimum knowledge that you got in ENC 1101. It's the same type of situation, the same type of scenario when it comes to employment. However, it's hard for you to identify what you're doing as a case manager as like the 1101 step because you're not giving yourself credit. So what I mean by that is if you were a part of a team, I'm gonna give a real example from one of my coaching clients. If you were a part of a team that was responsible for developing this project, right? Or let's say you are part of a special committee and you all are responsible for planning, facilitating, and hosting multiple community events throughout the year. However, you're like, all I did was secure a speaker, and you don't even say it like that. All I did was send an email to ask somebody to be a speaker. But however, you're looking at a macro job where they're wanting someone to be responsible for planning and coordinating events. You're not going to even consider yourself to be an ideal candidate for that role because you don't see yourself, you don't see like your securing of that speaker, even if it was one email, even if your supervisor already had a pre-existing relationship with them. If you don't see that as a big deal, you won't see how you are qualified to do something like that. And that is a good example for someone who likes to event plan. Like I always talk about, macro work is more than policy. I have had several coaching clients who in their free time, they love to do event planning things. They're always hosting events for their friends and families. They're always planning travel trips for groups and things like that. I'm like, you should get a macro job where you are a part of the event planning team because macro organizations, because their primary scope of work is to amass buy-in from stakeholder groups and they have large pots of funding, they have whole event planning teams. So I say all that as an example. But again, let's go back to the ENC 1101, 1102 example. Your work that you do as a case manager is the 1101. The macro job is 1102. However, you're not going to if you don't give yourself credit for what you do properly, you're not going to have the confidence to even go into 1102. Right. So I want to say that it's so important that you give yourself credit because giving yourself credit allows for you to understand how you, one, what I talked about earlier, have experience that you need to go after other jobs over and beyond case management jobs. And then the second way is that it increases your confidence over time, right? If your academic advisor put you straight into ENC 1102 and you hadn't been in school in 5 years, you're like, there's no way I can do that. Put me in 1101 first. Your confidence would have been way more stronger because you know, okay, I have the experience because I did 1101 last semester. I'm ready for 1102. So it's the same type of situation. The third way that giving yourself credit, not giving yourself credit hurts you in the long run is that it 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 limits your ability to be able to effectively talk about your work, your contributions, your experience, and like why you would be a good candidate for the job in an interview. I've had several conversations with social workers this year. Um, who were considering coming into the accelerator, where they're like, I apply for macro jobs, I get interviews, however, I don't get job offers, right? And so I'm listening to their body of work. They are phenomenal, like on paper. However, it falls flat when it comes time to talk about their work, right? And I say that because when you don't give yourself proper credit for what you do, again, the way I normally talk about it is you don't think it's a big deal. What it does for your ability to master interviews is that you are not able to contextualize and attach your experiences to the needs of the employer. So, what that looks like for a lot of social workers who don't give themselves credit and who fall flat in interviews and never progress to a job offer is you find yourself oftentimes reverting back to when answering questions to very, if you're a clinical social worker, reverting back to very clinical type scenarios or very case management type scenarios, or answering questions from a very passion like field place, from a passion centered place, rather than tangibles, rather than outcomes, rather than values to the employer's bottom line. So I'll give you an example. I recently had a coaching client who started going on her first round of macro interviews since working with me. And she had two. She got two within like the first 30 days of completing the program. And her reflection from her second interview was that she was like, I don't feel that I did good. I said, what did you think happened? She said, honestly, she said, she said, I felt like I started talking too much about clinical work. She said, so much so that the interviewer like made point of that, like made a note about it, like said something, made a comment about the fact that her responses were very clinical in nature and that this wasn't a clinical role and that they have a history of working with clinical social workers, but this specific position that they're hiring for is a true macro role. So my immediate response to her was, one, were you nervous? She said, yeah. So I was like, that's understandable. That was your first real interview in addition to the other one that you had. So nerves is going to be a big thing. However, what will help her going forward is over the last several weeks since that interview, she has been spending, I've had her spending a lot of time on really identifying the experience that she has and really sitting with the fact that it was a big deal. Right. Because when she first started working with me, she was a person that was like, well, I did, but it really isn't all of that. I did just this, or I did this that one time. She didn't equate it to being a big deal. So she was coming from the place of not giving herself credit. And so I wanted to share that with you because when you don't give yourself credit, it shows up in your interviews because you're unable to talk about your work from the standpoint of what is a benefit to this employer that you're talking to. So for a lot of social workers, and she said this was true for her, you find yourself talking about like your passion and talking about case management type stuff. And then when you're talking to macro employers, they don't care about your passion. No employer cares about your passion. Is it a nice to have? Yes, a nice to have. However, employers are hiring you to understand how can you add to their bottom line. That be it, a fee for a social service program, be it a nonprofit, for profit. They are there to make money and they're hiring people who can help them make money or who can help them advance their vision and mission. And so if you're talking about passion, 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 but not attaching it to any quantifiable like outcomes, values, additions to an organization, or just like expertise around the thing, it's gonna flop. So I wanted to name that for you because if you are not advancing to job offers, it most likely is because you're not giving yourself adequate credit for the things that you've done. So it leads you to be lacking in the way that you talk about your work. Because if you don't think it's a big deal, how are you going to sell somebody else on your experience being a big deal. That's the whole point of that. So I'll recap the three things that I talked about today. One, the topic that we talked about today is why it's so important to give yourself credit for the work that you do. The first way is when you start you don't even have to put in a resume. Just start telling yourself like, wow, in that meeting today, I contributed an idea and they love that idea, right? When you start giving yourself credit, you then start amassing this database of experience that you have that you can then use as a baseline when looking at jobs outside of case management that you potentially may be interested in. And so you're not automatically disqualifying yourself. You see the job, you're like, oh no, I can't do it, right? So when you are clear and where you've clearly identified, this is where I've done this, this, and this. Okay, that is over and beyond the standard of case management. If I've done it here, I can look at jobs in this other department. Another way that giving yourself credit helps you over time is that it increases your career confidence to go after the scary jobs, right? So instead of just amassing all of these links to jobs that you never hit apply to, you will have the confidence to hit apply on them. Or another way that lack of career confidence shows up other than like scrolling and saving and scrolling and never applying is you spend a whole bunch of time doing informational interviews. Like I don't teach my coaching clients to do informational interviews because instead of interviewing with people, you could be spending that time hitting apply and going through the process of getting interviews, right? So maybe you're spending your time endless days and hours doing informational interviews. The reason why you're doing that is because your career confidence is low, and most likely is low is because you don't give yourself proper credit for what you do. And so you're seeking others to try to like pump you up enough to feel like you can do it. But if you had the data of what you've actually done, you can increase your own career confidence to go after the jobs you want. The third way that not giving yourself credit hurts you over time is that it prevents you from being able to effectively master interviews to get job offers because you then don't have, when you don't give yourself credit, again, you don't have a database to pull from as far as experiences. You're not specific enough in your examples and responses to questions for employers to understand how you are a value add to their organization where they can't see themselves doing this work without you, right? It leads to you being in interviews and talking from a place of passion, or very social work centered conversations rather than this is what I've done. These are my contributions. This is what it's helped these populations achieve. This is what it's helped my organization achieve. This is what it's helped advance over the years, things that are value add to organizations. So I wanted to come on and talk about the importance of giving yourself credit because it really is important. A lot of people think that they have the confidence to go after the macro job they want, and I always bust that in half because they don't, right? That's why I work with my coaching clients on confidence through very strategic processes that I've created over the years that work for me and work for the 185 other plus social workers that have landed macro jobs since working with me. And I really wanted to say though that the starting point of it all is that you don't give yourself credit. So start small today. Give yourself credit for the work that you do. Stop minimizing what you do. Stop leading from the place of, a lot of people lead from the place of, I want to be humble, right? Or I feel like I should, if it was me and my team, I should say we, right? Or maybe it's just because you haven't been thoroughly invested in your career where you really are paying attention to what is it that you're doing that's a big deal. All right. Or maybe it's because you view yourself as a perfectionist and you think, well, like this is nothing, I've done way bigger things. Or maybe it's because you're a high achiever, whatever it is. I encourage you to do a self-assessment today, to do some deep self-reflection. I don't call it self-assessment. Do a deep self-reflection today to really identify where is this originating from? Why aren't you giving yourself credit for it? It may be that your employer, because your employer doesn't make a big deal about it, you don't think it's a big deal. And for many social workers, that's true too, because you work in low quality jobs with employers who are ultimately overworking you, because your employer is not giving you that external validation of this is a big deal to our organization. You then internalize that as well as not being a big deal. But that's where the onus is on you, for you to attach value to it, for you to learn how to attach value to it. Hence the whole reason why I had the webinar on Tuesday, right? I'm showing job posts, real-time macro job posts in the interview with salaries, showing like you can make upwards to $300,000 as a macro social worker, where this experience that you did in your case management job is all they're looking for in this macro job. And that alone shows you the value of it attached to dollars. And then if you look at that in relationship to like the scope of work, and on Tuesday, I was showing jobs that were doing work on a global level. I was showing them jobs that was doing work on a national level, jobs that was doing work on a regional level in the US. When you look at it from a lens of, oh, my value extends beyond just my current supervisor saying, good job, Susie. Good job, Tasha. You did good. You can then better understand what you are doing to then attach value to it to give yourself credit for it. But really, truly, a lot of people is because you're not getting the external validation that you think you should maybe be getting. But I gotta go. I got another appointment. I'm up here just talking to y'all.